Greetings, Bone Ponies. This is Cody from Tabletop Totality. I'd like to extend a warm thanks to everyone who came out and participated or donated to our Extra Life fundraiser, which was on game day for November 7th of 2020. Our team raised over $1,500 for the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals for the benefit of sick and injured children. Extra Life itself has raised over $13 million for the year of 2020. They are still collecting donations. If you'd like to find out how to come and become involved with Extra Life or donate, we have a link available on our website. So from all of us here at the Bone Pony Ranch, thank you so much.
In a distant world of fantasy and magic, lush vegetation, mountains the size of skyscrapers, and valleys as deep as the ocean trenches, a world unknown, new, mystical, tabletop totality. Hi, I'm Frank.
I am so confused. I thought this was a podcast. I'm Cody.
I'm Steven, and I'm transported into a world of wonderment and mystery.
And I'm Neil, and I'm just, happy to be here.
Today we will be discussing world building.
Yeah, we're going to talk about building worlds.
That beautiful immersion of tree to cactus and cactus to player, the beautiful roundabout there.
Again, I'm lost, but we're going with it.
Well, it's a new world, so...
Yeah, I guess so.
And do not sing the Disney song that relates to that, because we will be sued.
And Disney does not mess around.
No, they do not.
Please... pity us.
It is a different world. So
a whole new place.
Yes. Let me just put this out there as a general question. Where do you start? There's so much to take into consideration, from the denizens to the way everything looks to... well, just everything. You have to come up with every detail, and then within details, there's more details. And then you have to also think of the grand scheme of things. There's so much to think about. Where do you start? I think everybody should start with that, I guess. So we can start with Cody. Cody, where do you start?
For myself, I try to, I try to keep in mind that these tabletop games are a collaborative effort between you and your players. So I would stress very strongly, I'm using capital letters here, people, that you don't have to necessarily figure everything out from the get-go. You don't have to write a novelization of your idea of your campaign to build a large and interactive world that has, qualities that lend to the immersion of your players. You don't have to have every single thing figured out. And I think if you look at it as that huge big picture, it's very daunting, I think, to people. And I also think that it's a trap to set you up for getting lost in the details when, if you are a little bit more loose in your outlines in your world, you can adapt to what your players are bringing to the table. You can work with them. So for me to start, some general things, I try to think of a history, and I just come up with a loose outline, and that's just because I'm a history nerd. Because I think I go off of my history for a place. If there was a battle there, if there was a hero there, I'll throw a statue in the city. I'll name a place after a hero from 1,000 years ago or something like that. And that all, or just, those are all just little things that kind of lend to, I think, the overall feel of your world.
Oh,
so,
nice.
So for me, I would say, think about, if you're going to build a town, you sit there, you go, okay, well, what's this town? What do they do? What do they make? What does the town sound like? What does the town smell like? You do the same thing for cities. So you just do that for your world. It's just on a bigger scale. Where do these people come from? Why do they live here?
I agree. To have an immersive world, you need to allow, as much as you want to create this, you need to allow your players to also create. But it's difficult because they're not going to be there the whole process. And if they wanted to kind of be there the whole process, they'd probably be DMing the campaign you're doing instead of being a player in it.
No doubt.
But kind of my way I go about it, if I'm building a huge world, even if I'm doing towns, I like to draw it all up first. I try and, I hit my biomes. I have, that tundra, plain, desert. I try and get those in there if I'm building a big world.
Preach it.
And I try and keep that diversity in there. But yeah, I sketch that whole world out, and then as I build in and as I draw in all of that stuff, it just makes things flow. So I'll be like, oh, it'd be really cool if I had like a mountain spine here in the shape of some creature, and now that's my history. Now there's lore there. Now I have maybe some tribes that live there and they worship it as some great god. Boom. Now, and I'm just slowly grabbing points and building off of that. And I think it makes that task less daunting because everything else starts to fill it in. So once I have like a basic concept of this is the terrain, maybe I have a couple of pieces here. Maybe I started naming some of the mountains or some of the valleys, some of the rivers. And depending on how I name those, it speaks to the people that live there, because why would they have named it that way? Or as like Cody said, maybe now I created a hero that this is named after, and once you kind of get that going, that's when I bring it to my players, and I'm like, hey, I have this cool homebrew, or I have this cool world that I want us to play. This is kind of what's going on there. What type of characters do you want to play? And then they come back with kind of a rough draft backstory. I build my world map. I show them stuff. I give them a little detail. Hey, the North is this type of country. There's these tribes, little things, not everything. So then they can latch onto it, and now I can work with them to build that. And that's kind of my process. I start off just drawing it down and then just letting it take me away from there. And I think that's one of the biggest things.
I'd like to pigtail just two things off of what you just said. I don't think I've ever named a place in advance. I think I've always drawn my map before I've ever named a single location. So we're on the same team on that one.
Sure.
Yeah. Number two, when you're talking about like, hey, like the North is like this, the South is like that, I think that is so great to just have enough things figured out about a place that like you could like sit there and tell like, okay, yeah, you're from this country. This is what they specialize in. This is like their major crop or their major import, export. Just have those like 3 or 4 little things can really just lend to the whole overall picture.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it allows, like, I always liked it when I was joining a campaign as a player, and somebody would be like, yeah, this is kind of the rough abouts about my capital cities and the area around their kingdom and stuff like that. So then I could already paint a picture of my character. So for myself, when I'm creating worlds, I want that same role play aspect available for my character, like my players that I'm DMing for.
Right on. Steven, what do you do?
So I haven't really created a whole lot of worlds. When I used to want to make a world, I would always sort of think of it, like I would always go back to like the beginning of the world as if it existed realistically. Like I would think about like if a planet, like when the Earth was formed, like there were peaks and there were valleys, and then the valleys got filled by water, and then like the mountains rose up, and like the mountains would create rivers, and those would create bodies of water, and then people would go to those bodies of water, and that was where civilization would happen. And I always tried to make a map using that kind of idea, and it never went anywhere. And so I tried making worlds. I tried making a world where that would happen, and it would be like, okay, I've got like 20 layers in Photoshop of me drawing like the heights of these mountains and stuff. I'm sick of this. I don't want to do it anymore. Recently, I started thinking about a world that I've had in mind for a while. And I was thinking about the reason why it came to be is because I was thinking about a character that I want to play. And I was thinking about the origin of that character. And I was like, well, where does this character come from? What town does this character come from? And I created a city for the character to come from. And the character has a sister who, in their backstory, went off to a magic school in the capital of that country. And then I was like, okay, well, what's the capital like? Like, where is the capital? How is that like? And then, like, what is the area surrounding, like, the hometown of these two characters? What is that like? And sort of like all this stuff about the land there, and then sort of expanding it out from there. So I kind of went on like a reverse of what it sounds like Cody and Neil are doing, where it's like, instead of thinking of like the history of like all this stuff, you can sort of just think of a single character. And I also thought about the character's history, like their family history going back generations and generations. I decided that one of their ancestors was like this great hero that stopped a great evil, and the capital city of that nation is named after the party of heroes that stopped that great evil. And I'm also sort of thinking about like, well, how do they treat certain character, like certain people in this area, and how does that affect things? And you know, this area is like, they want to have trade with other regions, but they can't. Why can't they? And developing an idea for, well, maybe to the west there's like a giant, or to the east rather, there's like a giant desert that prevents them from going to the sea. And maybe to the north there's like a mountain range, and under one of those mountains is like a Tarrasque or something that they don't want to run into, or it'll destroy their entire nation and stuff like that. So like, and then from there, like building out a world, like a country and a world from just that, like that concept. And I'm still working on it. But then I also have an idea for like the reason why the world exists. Like Cody was saying, like, why does this world exist at all? Like, what did this world, why was this world created? And there's a whole thing involving the gods, and like a big war between the gods that created this world, and this whole mythology about it, and the reason why there are like all these different races on that world. And it's still sort of coming together. I'm still sort of formulating how that world works, but at the same time, it's the idea is that I like the idea of having a setting for players to play in, but also having areas surrounding that area. So, for example, if I were to set a game in this country that I've been like sort of thinking about, I would say, well, your characters can come from the surrounding areas, and those are sort of undefined. Like they could have like, so that way the players can come up with their own like homelands and home customs and things that don't necessarily match.
Word.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah. So that way it's like, oh, well, my character comes from the country to
yeah, it was a good idea. Yeah.
I mean, thank you, but it's but that's just sort of how I think of it, is like, if I create a setting and your player character doesn't necessarily want their character to be from that area, it's like, okay, well, then you come from another country, and then they have to come up with a reason why they're in that area, why they're in the land that the story takes place in, and then even we could go to their area, and then that sort of expands the world. That helps the players expand the world a little bit, and like take some of the pressure off the DM to do that. But at the same time, then it puts pressure on the DM to sort of be like, okay, well, you gave me this outline, so now I have to get as close to what you told me that this country is like as possible, you know, while still like flavoring it my own way. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Okay.
I think
it's a pretty cool way.
I think you brought up some good points, and the that idea with the like letting them basically be from like their own country, or like their own like
culture.
Their own cultures. That's a cool idea.
It does help mitigate a lot of the creative juices that you have to put out. And it's just like, oh, well, I'm from this area. And then it's like, oh, great. Yeah. Tell me all about it. It's like, all right, I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. And Steve, he also brought up a really good point about like being a dungeon master or being the game master is basically like pretend that you know absolutely jack shit about your world and start trying to figure it out. Like you don't have to necessarily get everything, but just be curious. Like how many? Okay, so like, we have a sun and we have a moon here on Earth. Where in my world is there two moons? Is there three? Is there several suns? You know, how
What
many
is the
days are in a
meaning?
year?
What is the
Right.
meaning of the multiple moons?
Right.
You
Like,
know?
what? Yeah. How does that factor into the mythology or the culture? You know, like just like I like how Steve was like, he's like, oh well, what's the capital like? Well, who rules the capital? It was just like I don't know, like just be like a curious like 5-year-old in your world, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I know for myself, I have a few different versions of how I do it, two main ones. But before I even like touch into either of those, I feel like I have this analogy in my head where it's kind of like a cast iron pan. You know, you together, you know, adding all the different ingredients as you move along, as you're building different meals. In this case, those meals are actually adventures and so forth. You're seasoning the pan, you know,
Tasty adventures.
and you're slowly adding more and more season to the pan to make it, you know, more hearty and more rich. And you can easily ruin that by adding, you know, like by soaping and scrubbing it down with, you know, abrasive materials to really pull everything off. You could destroy it. It's very easy to destroy it, but if you slowly work at it and, you know, you focus on the areas that matter the most as you're moving the story along, like you can build something really amazing that seems like, wow, they're a genius. Like you just been flying by the seat of your pants, you know, before
That's
your next adventure.
everything. Everything is flying by the seat of your pants. If anybody tells you any different, they are lying and still flying by the seat of their pants.
Yeah.
Well, it's like everybody, you know, there's a lot of attention on guys like, you know, like Matt Mercer who like DM like professionally, you know. And I think Matt's great at what he does, but you can watch the show and you can see there's times where he's like, shit, you know, like I have to sit here and make something up now, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. So you can plan all day and still be caught totally off guard by your players.
And I think that's why a lot of the pre-built adventures focus on a smaller area, because sure, they're adding to the bigger, greater world like Forgotten Realms, etc., but they're focusing on a smaller scale. They kind of detail like, oh, in this area there's these creatures and you have these charts and this and that, and over here you have these things, and oh, you want to look out for the the giant longship that's been crashed there that has a whole bunch of frost giants in it, and over here you have this, and over here you have this. So this way you can kind of, while you're flying by the seat of your pants, you have some things you can touch on, but you don't have to necessarily force it.
Yeah, no, and I mean, even adding to your, like, I loved your analogy of like cooking, because it is very similar to cooking. You also don't want to over season as a DM, where you plan for everything and absolutely anything, and none of that gets used.
Too much description.
Yeah, don't blow a proportion out of a spell.
Yeah, don't make a spell sound really awesome, but
and
it's not.
It's just a little cantrip.
Magical bolts fly from his fingertips, bracing and piercing everything they come into contact with.
No, it was my Forge Cleric NPC, and he summoned his spiritual weapon, and it was like a flaming anvil or something that like fell from the sky, and everybody was like, "Whoa, this guy's got amazing magic!" And I was like, "Oh, a spirit weapon," and they were like, "Oh, like, that's just stupid.
Get that out of here!
Yeah, it's garbage. Throw it away.
Never explain a spell like that ever again."
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And they're like, "You're the worst DM ever." Like, aw.
That's awesome. I would totally use that anvil like all the time.
All the time, yeah. That
sounds dope. Like,
people are ready to like trade everything for this anvil until it was like it's just a spiritual weapon, you know?
Yeah, even though like
you can't have it, bro.
Yeah, even though the description, and even like if you roll out the damage, it's like it's not a lot. People would be like, I still want it, but the second they hear, oh, it's just spiritual weapon, just reskin, it's like, oh.
Yeah,
Moving
they
on.
shit on me just instantly. They were like, "Campaign's over. Go home. Learn how to DM."
Yeah. So I actually never got into my methods here. So the two that I primarily do are, the first one is purely story based. So I kind of come up with what the story I would do. I kind of get a feel for what people wanted to do. But then comes in the rogue part of it, where it's pure. Honestly, once I get a gist of how everything's going to look, I kind of just wing it. I improv a lot of it. And then I take a lot of feedback as I'm going. Like, people will be like, oh, I wonder what's over here. How's this look? And I just kind of fill it in as I go. Or I take their suggestions, because they will subliminally say stuff that they think, especially when it comes to story and stuff, or what might be in a certain area. And I'll take some things that I like, or I'll take some things that I don't like, and I'll put there. And then I just kind of manipulate it, and I just kind of sculpt around it and create different things in the different ways that I want it to look. A lot of the time you can get a lot of hints just from the way your players are interacting with your world, especially from the beginning. It's always good to have at least like a solid town and things around it, and at least a general place where you want them to start, and then they inform more of what your world should look like as they're interacting with it than anything that you could ever really just come up with, because good creations are always collaborative, even if it's just suggestions people throw out. And then that leads into the other version, where we created a big long-term campaign once, where the one version was everybody made a map, and all we had to do was, you just had to make sure that where my map ended, your map picked up with the C line, and then you created your part, and then we taped them all together. That was a fun one, because especially if there was
cool.
Yeah. And then the other version, where we created a general history together, where we all met up when you were working at the campground there, and we met up, I think it was like bi-weekly, and we just kind of slowly built out this storyline. And then our DM at the time, Sean, he kind of fleshed it out even beyond what we had done. And then we waited a couple of months, almost a year, and then he had time to really just let it marinate. And once we got into that, like, there was so much beyond what we did. We all knew what the backstory was, and of course things would come up, but he was able to really just go.
Yeah, it was cool, because we were like, okay, this is like the major, like, defining event that has taken place in this world, and it's influenced all of our future culture, for all of our characters. Like, all of our characters are products of what happened, like this great event that happened. And so Sean really took it and ran with it, because he went like so involved. Like, he did a great job on that one. Yeah. And that was like Sean's a big fan of video games, and he used to love those huge like Total War games, all that, where you just like, it's like just hack and slash, like massive battlefield,
endless armies.
Yes. And so like Sean,
his big favorite one was what was it? Dragon Quest? Not Dragon Age.
Legend of the Dragoon. Yeah.
Legend of the Dragoon. Give me. Yes. Great game.
Yeah, you young kids out there, go get Legend of the Dragoon PS1.
Yeah.
That's PlayStation 1.
It is on the PSN store. If you have a PlayStation 3, you can buy it and play it.
Not sponsored by PS anything. Just so
we're open to suggestions though, Sony.
Yeah.
Hit us up.
Yeah, you could probably buy me, Sony. We're all right with it.
Yeah. I got a PS4 in my house. What's up?
Yeah. So that was that whole thing. Like, we had all together, everybody pitched in one way or another, and then we within our backstories we built on that, and then like all good magicians, he was able to piece it together. So it was like, wow, this is like crazy. Wow, how did you do all this? Like, we did 90% of the work. even just with our backstories, like we did most of the work. He just was able to piece it together in a way that it didn't look like part of my language, but shit, it looked good.
Oh yeah,
And it
he
worked.
Yeah, we definitely had everybody had a lot of input in that campaign. That was a major collaboration. Like I remember what you were saying, we didn't just have like a session 0, like we had several sessions of like basically eating pizza at the cabin and like figuring out like where our world like what happened, you know? And what I was saying about like the total war games and everything is that Sean was also able to give us like he made the world seem bigger than what we had just made, which was cool. But then he made like the conflicts and the wars that were happening, like they were epic.
Yeah, even though
Like-
they were small scale, not like the whole continent.
Right, but his battles were like they were epic.
Yeah.
Like, and it was some like I think that added to it as well because it made it just like it wasn't just the heroes, like it wasn't just us, like there was nations and groups fighting against one another. And you know, Sean would have like a city that would get wiped out and there would be thousands of dead from combat, you know,
Yeah.
like, and it was just like that's just what happened.
Yeah, and you would
know?
watch a lot of that happen too, which when it comes to large scale things like that, like he is definitely bar none. Like I looked at the way he did a lot of that stuff to just be like, all right, I need to kind of emulate what he was doing, because there's just like, you know, you'd be in one area and, you know, all of a sudden a door would pop open and a bunch of people are fighting, and then 5 guys would come out at you. It may not seem like a lot when you're fighting them, but still, like there's more going on than what you see on the screen, and you want to get to it.
Yeah, it's that pressure, it's that force of building up that there's stuff there. It's that time constraint, which is hard when you're playing like Dungeons and Dragons or a lot of other role-playing games to create as a DM, and it can be difficult, but when you have it, oh, it's amazing.
Yeah. Now for those that aren't D&D based, well, I'll pull out and I will go to a different type of game. Obviously Star Wars, there's so much there that you can use, so you don't have to do so much building. You just kind of need to work within the realm that's there. But another one I personally enjoy playing is modern, where, you know, you kind of play in the now-ish or within the recent time frame somewhere. And we have this city called Palmer's Grove. It's anywhere USA, you know, it doesn't matter where it is. It's just Palmer's Grove. And honestly, it is a terrible place to live. There's always terrible things happening, and it's up to the heroes to deal with that. And a lot of Palmer's Grove has been influenced over the years. Primarily, there's 2 cop characters that inhabit that world. One played by Cody and one played by our buddy Sean. I've played a few characters within that. One guy sold ice cream and drugs. His name was Push Pop. And he had the ice cream van.
That's a pretty solid character.
Yep. And Steve had a hacker character in that one. Like there's a lot to that world. So that built itself as we would play. And I'm more on the side of ridiculousness. So when I would DM that, or other people would DM that world, it was just known as a ridiculously insane place. So anything could happen, you know, where you'd be driving down the street running from bad guys, and then dudes would pop up on top of buildings with RPGs and literally try and take you out. Your vehicle's flipping over, you know, people are getting thrown out of it. You're in intense combat situations. And then there'd be these like hardcore RP sessions within that happen, pushing the story along. And when you were done, like that was the style of campaign, world, and play, where when you were done with it, like, you know, too often when you're playing in D&D, it's like you're trying to get to this place all the time, and it can get frustrating. So having a world where you can get away from everything else, so you can play a 1-shot or a 3-nighter and just step away and release, and then you can go back to your other things. And it's just like that, in my eyes, is very important when you're building worlds and so forth.
I'd almost say you bring up a point there, which is pretty good for us to talk about. It's the difference between building a campaign world and a sandbox world.
Oh, yes. Interesting.
And Palmer's Grove, 100% sandbox. Anything goes. You can build anything in there, and it changes 3 weeks to Tuesday.
Never heard that before.
And then you build
Trademark.
Yeah.
3 weeks to Tuesday. There's a new T-shirt, folks.
Yeah, coming soon to a online shopping center near you. And then you have these campaign settings where you're kind of doing that more history side of things, and here's this great event that happened. For those who can't see at home, I used quotes, air quotes, that happened, creating this big storyline. And to build those worlds is vastly different. I used to, when I was first getting into DMing and playing a lot of these tabletop games, role-playing games, man, it was always sandboxes. Like I would kind of have I'd have a storyline there, but I was flying, right? Just doing whatever I wanted. Hey, we're in a town. Guess what? It's ran by vampires. Does it have anything to matter with the town next door? Nope. But this one's got vampires, and it's a town that they're just stopping on the way to wherever they needed to go. Does it need to be there? Not really. Is it cool? Yeah.
That's almost like the serialized, episodic style Star Trekian view, where it's like every episode is just something crazy. In the general scheme of things, especially in older Trek, it really didn't matter. It was just like, yeah, that episode happened, but we don't really it has nothing to do with the new stories or anything like that. Whereas some people, especially the more deeper you get into this hobby or this lifestyle, depending on who or what you're doing with it, is eventually you do get to those big stories where it's just like, oh no, what you did in session 3 affected session 74 because you took this guy out and he was going to influence this election or this thing or this event, and he was out of the picture. So now version C of the situation happens and it leads to this catastrophe or something, and there's always a consequence, even if you don't necessarily realize it. And I've played a bunch of campaigns that had long-term effects, something you did eventually came and it had the action had a reaction later on.
To quote the master, His Lordship Stephen King, everything is eventual.
Yeah, no,
and I'm a firm believer. I know Frank was just saying before about D&D sometimes could get annoying because it's we're always trying to go to the place to do the thing, to meet the guy, to save the person.
Yeah, to explain it for the 5th time to them.
Right, that's what we're doing. I it's kind of repetitive, and what you were saying before about Star Wars is Star Wars is easy because it's just this huge universe, and you can just be like, yep, we're on planet A today, and this is what's happening here. It's very easy. But some of the things that I like to do, I like to really think about the actual, maybe the story, the concept of what it is that I want to have happen before I even made my world. In my current campaign, just because I'm a history nerd, I was thinking about the 100 Years' War between France and England. And I was like, well, what would have happened if that was contained, just in Great Britain, an island nation where there was just a war for 100 years and it just was nonstop.
Yeah, split in twain and just constantly going.
Right. What would happen if the American Civil War went on for 100 years? So I was like, let's do let me make something like that. And that's how I came up with my world. And then from there, I just kind of I like to like every place I go on my map. I don't necessarily have everything figured out. I've left things open for when my players get to this place or when my players ask me something like, hey, where would half orcs be from, on your map? I could sit there and look at it and be like, okay, well, yeah, this is where they'd be. Without having have known that ahead of time.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't figure everything out. You're never going to be prepared for every question or every situation that comes out.
Well,
So
you'll never be able to play your world
no,
if you do it that way. You
if
know
you're
what I
at
mean?
that point, like that's what we said before. If you're at that point, it is no longer a campaign. It's no longer a game. It's a novel.
And go write
And
it.
just go write it.
And publish it, and
Would
people
you just
love
go
it.
write it? Just go write
just,
it.
just go write it.
Yeah, Cody.
Jeez.
Yeah, Cody.
I am writing. I was working on the book today.
Good.
Just go write it.
Good. Yeah. So, I mean, it really comes down to
Wait. Before we get too far, before I lose this thought,
go.
I believe no way is better than the other with this, what we're talking about either. If you can only build sandbox worlds and you like that and that's what you like to DM, do it. Don't feel that pressure.
Is that a jab at me, bro?
No. But don't feel that pressure to, I have to build this complex over, world where I have to remember every single thing my characters do because I need it to impact episode 90 of my campaign. Like, if you want to just go have fun, go do that. If your fun is making a campaign like that, then awesome. People are going to love it regardless, no matter any play style I have ever met from people I've introduced or even myself. I've enjoyed both. And there's points and times where I'm going to want to play a sandbox over this grueling campaign that's amazing. You know what I mean? But maybe I just want a one shot. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it.
Far too often than not, I find that if you plan before something happens for something, it's never going to happen anyway. So you're wasting your time. A lot of that stuff, like what you're saying, where it's like, oh, well, then this will affect episode 90. Like, I kind of let that stuff happen naturally, personally. And I will be playing and, a player will do something. And I just log it. I'm like, okay. And then as I'm looking for stuff to help influence something or for something to come back, and I'm on episode 90, and I'm like, oh, okay. Ooh, that one time when he stole this from this guy, and he knew it, and he didn't confront him. And then you start revealing all the layers as, yes, he's come back for you finally, and he's been leveling up, and now he's getting his revenge, Cody. And he goes to stab Cody, but Cody's ready for him anyway, and he shoots him with the blaster. That stuff is so much more influential if you just kind of let it happen naturally and don't force it.
Oh yeah. No doubt.
So often do people they holding on to these things, and then they get too distracted. Like, I work with a lot of students in general, both high school and college. And
what are you saying about students, Frank?
Well, what I'm saying is that too often than not, do they get distracted with the details than with getting to the end. And when you look at it in the long scheme of things, you have a finite amount of time to hand in a project, work in the art field mostly. So being able to at least get it so it's, all right, it's good enough to hand in. Now I have time, like it's done, it's good enough to be handed in. Now I'll go back and I'll add those details and make it better. That is very important in my view of how to do the thing, is figure out your beats. Like when you're making a song, figure out your beats. All right, we have the rhythm. We're good to go there.
Do we have the rhyme?
Well, and now we need to make the rhyme, and now we can get creative because
Rosemary Baby, I've Got the Time.
Did you just make that up, or is that a song?
It's from Clutch. Clutch is an awesome band.
Yeah. I was thinking of a certain Jamaican bobsled team.
Okay. Anyway, so figuring out like
anyone in particular, or
Nobody's seen Cool Runnings about the.
I have, but you were like a particular Jamaican bobsled team. I was like, yeah, anyone in particular?
That particular.
That one.
Yeah, that's
today's topic.
Feel the
is
rhythm, feel the rhyme.
World building. So, stretching it out to here's the end and here's all the beats I'm gonna hit, and then filling in those extra areas that could use some more massaging, and then also being able to just throw it out the window halfway through it and be like, oh, well, they're not doing that, so there's no point in me even getting too deep into that anyway, and I'm going to hit this instead, and it can even add more to your world. You don't know.
I feel like if you get so invested in your world, and then when you plan so much for something, and your players are like, yeah, we're going nowhere near that place, like you are going to, there's going to be part of you subconsciously that's going to be like, I want them to go to this place. And you're going to it's going to try to influence your actions to get them to go there. And that's a surefire way to end up railroading your party there, partner. And that is not very Bone Pony like.
Nope.
So, I think, hold on. I think there's certain points you need to railroad, but main plot points, then they know if it's a main plot point and you're trying to railroad them. And what does the party do once they know what the DM wants? They want no part of it. Yeah, they want no part of it. So don't show your hand.
Don't reveal. Don't show your weaknesses.
Yeah, that's when the ponies really come out. They start bucking and tossing. The one thing I've learned from day one till now of my DM lifestyle was don't force it.
Who taught you that? Who taught you
your brother? Actually, he literally, if he knew that something was supposed to happen, and I just like put too much emphasis on something, he would veer away from that so quickly. And a lot of the time, he was just doing it, like kind of testing to see how far out he could go, or how too often when you're a young kid, you're trying to railroad the thing anyway. You didn't think of, well, what if they don't do this? Or you account for things that they may not even think about at the time. Like,
yeah, just go kill my vampire already.
Yeah. And it's like, well,
kill him.
Yeah, or like they're fighting a villain and it's like, oh, well, they have their weaknesses in the staff, but you didn't give them any friggin' hints that it was the staff. Just because magic's shooting out of it doesn't mean they're going to attack the staff. Like, you got to think that stuff through. That's important stuff to think through. But a lot of the stuff within your world, like, sure, you want them to eventually get pickpocketed or something, or you want them to pickpocket something. Make sure you inform them that this town or this city is is very big with that specific thing. And it can help you along the way. Don't force it. Just leave it on the table. It's like a buffet. Let them pick at it.
Yeah, you can't force a bone pony to drink water. You can only bring it to the water. That's it. Yeah. And then you gotta let that bone pony decide if it's gonna die in a desert of dehydration or drink from your oasis.
Well, it is made of bones.
Die again.
Bone ponies never die.
So, bone ponies for life. But one of I agree with what you're saying, Frank and Neil. Frank and Neil. I agree with the idea of letting things just kind of develop, not forcing, because like I said before with the novelization, if you come up with such a story and everything hinges on your players doing what you expect or you want them to do, that's not necessarily that's not a role-playing game anymore. That's basically you've auditioned people to play characters in your book that you're like making in your mind.
Well, too often than not, to counter that, not to completely cut you off there, is you think that it's going to happen some way, and it only comes with experience, is that you can't just have a straight line. You have to account for things around the world that they see. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess I think that it's, I think in equal parts that there should be collaboration. Like there's a certain amount of give and take between the player and the person running the game.
Yeah.
And I feel like the players like yes, it's fun to go off and like do like crazy stuff, but sometimes like you also have to respect that the person who is across the table from you has spent a lot of time on what they've what they're presenting or what they've built for you guys to play in. And so I think sometimes like you have to abandon a little bit of the immersion of where it's like I'm here to play a collaborative game with friends,
Yeah.
and there's got to be a little give and take. So maybe if you ask your dungeon master, or when you go to a tavern, you say, oh well, what's on, what kind of ale do they have, and he says, oh well, the ale is a local dwarf brews it and it's a brown nutty flavored ale. Oh, okay, well what's it called? Oh well, it's called Dern's beverage or Dern's brew or whatever. Oh, okay, well what else do they have? What else? Well, what else? Or what else? Like at that point, I don't think it's about like finding out about your world. I think that's just the player giving the storyteller a hard time.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
there's a fine line between it, because like as you're saying, everybody sat down at this to play this world, and you can't account for everything when you're building a world, and everybody knows that. The player knows that. The DM knows that. The table knows it. It's a mimic. But
Always.
Everything is a mimic.
yeah. And you have to, as a player and the DM, you have to see, all right, do I continue elaborating on this, or are they just kind of being a dick and we're just going to move on?
And sometimes they may not even realize it, that they're like, oh, well, what else? Like sometimes they're just not aware that they're doing that. So you do have to give and take. You can't take everything personally, especially in life.
Yeah,
you just gotta
I
deal sometimes.
I feel like that. I'm speaking from experience of where I had an idea of what I thought. Like I was gonna run something, and I had an idea of what it was gonna be, and I had it all figured out, and I was proud of what I had made, and nothing went according to plan. Not a damn thing. And I remember being like, I was bummed. I was like, that was the worst experience of like role playing I've ever had. I was like, I'm done, and it doesn't pay to be that way. Like you can be creative, you can be immersive, but you don't have to kill yourself with coming up with all the fine details.
I think that's a very important point. I think you need to say that one more time, because I feel like people need to hear that again.
Yeah, I just don't think that you have to kill yourself with all of the details, all the nitty gritty, all the time. Like you're not going to be able to figure out everything. Your players are going to do something that you're not going to expect. There's just no way that you can account for it all. And
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes people get so like they just think it's so daunting. They're like, oh, I could never do that. Where it's can be very simple. It could just start from like even like what Steve was saying. I have a character in mind. Well, who's this character? Where do they come from? Where do they live? Oh, that's a city. Well, where's the city? Like, why is the city there? Oh, well, because it's near a source of fresh water, and there's mineral rich soil nearby. Like your world can just expand from all these little things. You don't have to have everything figured out, but
Yeah.
if you just come up with a few things every time you have a new location, I guarantee your world will appear much bigger than what you have figured out.
Yeah, and like I said, like that's the reason why my original world building technique of coming up with everything from the dawn of the planet all the way to the current age, like thinking about it now as like a more like as an adult, like this was back when I was in like my early 20s and stuff, and I wanted to make a world, and it was just like it was like I wanted to think of every little thing, and I still kind of do that. I still kind of try to figure out details that probably aren't super important, just so that I have them in case they come up. But like, if you do it that way, then as soon as your players throw any sort of monkey wrench into it, as soon as they ask a question that you can't answer, then all of a sudden your entire campaign goes away because you can't answer that one question that they came up with, which like you guys are saying could also be just them being dicks, them trying purposely.
But it's also so not true that like destroys your campaign. Like,
I mean, yeah,
like there's I'm not trying to interrupt on what you're saying, but like, don't be afraid to say, I will get back to you on that. I will answer that. Allow me to check my notes.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, if you're the type of person that has to plan everything meticulously and figure everything out beforehand, and then they come to you and they go, okay, well, what about this? And you can't answer that question, that could completely like derail your whole.
Oh, so you're gonna have like an American Psycho like business card moment.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Like, I didn't name all the gnomish beers on tap in my tavern.
Yeah, but then again,
a homeless man.
Yeah, but feed me a stray cat. But that's where like the whole improvisation thing comes in, and that's you as a DM more than anything. You need to be good at improvising because your players are going to throw a whole bunch of weird stuff into your campaign that you couldn't have planned for. Like you have this whole story in mind of like, oh man, I bet that the characters are going to do this, and then they're going to do this, and then they're going to find this guy, and then that's going to lead them to here, and then they're going to get to go to this new city that's so amazing because I spent months planning it out, and then they don't do any of that.
No interest in going to the city. They're all neutral characters. They don't care about your story whatsoever.
What type of ales do they serve in this tavern? Oh, they serve this, this, and this. Oh, are any of them any good? Some of them are okay. I think we could make better. Let's open a brewery in the town and just, challenge all these rival breweries. It's like, no, but you're supposed to talk to the wizard in the corner, and he's supposed to give you a quest to go to the dungeon and see this whole world that I'd created. And it's like, nah, man, we're gonna spend the next 2 years in game making beer to beat these dwarves, and it's like you've got to be able to like work with that and play around that. It's like if them doing something like that is going to throw your entire campaign out the window, then you have to just sort of learn to roll with it.
Well, no, to be fair on that one, if they took if you have like a fighter and a rogue and you have a cleric and a wizard, and then they're just like, well, screw all this adventuring stuff, we're gonna live in the city and make beer, like, they probably should have told you that before you started creating this gigantic campaign.
You can't hold that on the Troll Skull boys, okay? You gotta watch what you reward your players with. If you reward a brewery to your players and then they decide, oh, well, we got this nice brewery, we're gonna set this shop up for a little bit, you gotta roll with that.
Yeah.
You gave that option.
Yeah.
We bought a zoo, D&D edition.
Oh, no.
So what? One of the things I was thinking of, yes, you can't hold that against your players. If they, if you give them something and they're excited about it, or you show them a town and they want to explore the town, like that's people taking a vested interest in your world,
Yeah.
So you have to be, you have to be reasonable about that. You have to respect that. You can make suggestions, but you can also easily counter things. Like you were saying, oh, you have a wizard, you have a cleric, you have a fighter in this party, and they're like, oh, you know what, we're just going to set up shop here. We're going to start brewing beer because that's what we're going to do for the next 3 years of game. Okay. Well, 3 years have gone by. You're still level 1 because you haven't practiced anything for magic. You haven't gone and trained or fought anybody.
Uh-huh.
You've neglected all of your holy duty, for you doing this brewery. Like you to make your world seem real, you have to have things happen. You have to have consequences happen.
Yeah.
You have to have actions and reactions. And you have to have things that even happen off screen, because the focus should always be on your players. I say this all the time. Like your camera lens should be on the players, but you can make what's happening in that frame more interesting when information from outside of that frame comes in.
Yeah.
And they start realizing that, hey, you know what? We can't be everywhere at once.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And it's just like our world. You know, like every time people feel terrible, like there's a crisis. You know, like with Australia, it was on fire. Everybody was like, yeah. So I felt so terrible about what was going on. Well, yeah, how many people got on a boat or a plane or flew over there to do something about it?
Yeah.
You know, out of all the people
Not
that
many, you know?
yeah, that cared about it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, with a world, no, but like
Way
you
to
bring
make
up
it
a point,
real.
like with world building, look at what happens in our own world. Like you can explain that an atrocity happened and your heroes could do nothing. You know what I mean? There's certain aspects like you can maybe help out or send maybe you now lead a group of people, you can send some of them, but you yourself can't delegate that time over to go to fight off these demons here when you have this big picture there. And I think that's a really cool aspect of world building that sometimes doesn't get brought up. You know, it's very easy to be railroaded in on one mission, and as a DM you don't look at anything else. We're just going to paint this one picture. And to get a broad stroke in there with your paintbrush kind of it creates that urgency that we talked about prior, you know what I mean? And it's needed in world building.
was thinking, oh, go ahead, Frank.
Well, a good comparison is like we were playing in Schult, and we had come back from this long journey out, and we get in, we're trying to settle in, and we're trying to get into our base, and we're trying to drop off our supplies, and we look off in the distance, and there's a fire, and it looks like there's been this situation going down for a while. And we all just drop off whatever we could, and we just start running towards whatever's happening. And we get there, and the situation had been happening for like a couple hours. There's a bunch of buildings burnt down. There's people getting hurt. And we just go in there, and sure, yeah, we cleaned house. Bunch of people died beforehand. Bunch of people died while we were there. But it was just like, that's something that we had no control over. It just happened, and we had to deal with what we could, save who we could, and get out. And there was, did it have anything to do with the storyline? Not so much. We had a lot of RP stuff going on while we were coming back, while we were getting situated, while we were getting, settled down. And we had this adventure block, and it added to us as a team because we were able to work together more and actually save a bunch of people that probably shouldn't have been able to if we weren't working together. So random occurrences, random acts, random things like that happening. Like, you have your brewery boys, they're hanging out, they're tending to the fields, and they look across the hill and they see this smoke coming out from a nearby village, and they hear screaming and they hear swords clinking and slapping. Like, they should probably either A, get ready, or B, the curiosity is going to get them. Because to be 100% blunt, when you're RPing any kind of game, whether it be Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, Modern, Call of Cthulhu, you name it, is doing the same thing over and over, as mundane as farming in character. It's going to wear off sooner or later. They're going to want to get back to it. So having these random things in the world that are still happening, the gears are still moving in the world, even though they've stopped, it's still moving, is a very good way of, waking people up and be like, oh shit, like we need to deal with something. We need to go.
Yeah.
And it can actually add way more to the story, to the whole thing, especially if it's been like, well, for the past year, you guys have been doing this and all this other stuff's been happening. Oh, great. yeah, like we blew it. We could have stopped this. And it can actually weigh on the characters, and it can create better story even.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's one of the cool things
Sorry,
too.
go
Is
ahead.
like, I'm sorry, Neil, but that's one
No,
of the
you're good.
cool things when you show your players something or some place, and then they're gone for a time, and they've come back, and things have changed. And it's cool when the players care enough about what you've created that they're like, what do you mean it's different? Like, what do you mean like this isn't the way of the land anymore? Or they don't serve this anymore. Like, small things like that can get your players invested in your world, and it's cool to like have things change them or affect them off screen, that then they get to, like you were saying, it could affect their morality. They could be like, wow, I could have stopped this, or I need to do something about this.
Yeah, it keeps that world alive. And a lot of people, I feel like when you're world building, you have that struggle of how do I keep it, like keep it alive, keep it feeling like it's constantly moving. And that's one of the great ways to do it, is just having off camera stuff happen and they hear about it. They're going to an inn, they overhear, yeah, there's been a lot of bandit raids. Yeah, they don't have to do anything about it, they can investigate it, that could be a good side quest. But now if they also take that time, A, B, and C happens on their main quest line, and now they have to kind of push around it, and it keeps that, oh, I really want to explore this, but I gotta go this way because that's what my character was gonna do. You know what I mean? So I always think that's a really cool aspect to have.
Yeah. Having a good thing where it's like, oh, well, if they deal with the bandits now, the villages that the bandits are attacking, they become friendly with the characters, maybe even give them a discount when they're bartering and so on and so forth. But what they don't realize is that in the main storyline, they were suppressing the evil guards of this town or this city over here, which would have been easier for the players to, make it through this area. But now, since the bandits are gone, now the evil guards have taken over more territory. Now they have to deal with that problem. You can actually create things like that as you go, kind of move your chess pieces around, and it can create some interesting dynamic storytelling.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I wanted to use Frank's analogy before of cooking. I think that was a good analogy, because really, just to kind of, if you want to open up the Overlord's playbook here, I could show you that, like I the way I run my campaigns now is I kind of do what's called almost like deconstruction cooking, where you have, let's say you have like a meatloaf, or you have a pizza, but then you could cook it. You have a deconstructed pizza, where it's like you've basically broken down the flavor of pizza to just a few essential ingredients and not the whole self. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
So like they're like, oh, okay, well, this tastes this way because it has an acid and it has a fat and it has a protein. Sorry, you can hear my dog barking. There's thunder and fireworks outside.
Don't apologize for that beautiful dog. Keep going.
Okay. So he is beautiful. I love him.
Yeah, Bullseye just added very good, important information to the world building aspect.
I agree,
Thank you,
Bullseye.
I forgot where I was.
Deconstructed pizza.
Yeah, so
you're in your home.
I am. Yeah, where am I? So yeah, the deconstructed pizza. So that's kind of how I look at a story now. Or I kind of look how I look at my campaign, my plot line. I sit there and I go, okay, well, what are the few things that have to happen? Like, what are the few events that have to happen to propel my story forward? Like what are the few things that are the non-negotiable things? Like I said it before, with like the gods. Sure, you can bring your gods from Forgotten Realms or whatever into my setting, but my gods that I've created, they have precedence. Because it's my world. You know what I mean? So
It's technically our world because we play together, but whatever.
I know. We're gonna edit this part because this is.
No, we're
I
not.
just had a fucking mind blank.
No,
Yeah.
this is how we're gonna start the whole podcast.
No.
Cody just trying to think.
So, if I may, while Cody gets his thoughts back together, I think it's kind of like with the deconstructed aspect, it kind of harks back to something I said earlier where I figure out the points that I want to hit, and I also have filler too. So it's like, well, when I'm thinking, especially if it's like I have one night to DM or I have 3 nights to DM, I figure out, all right, here's the whole story, right? Here's the things that need to happen within the story. If they get too far ahead and I only have X amount fully fleshed out, I have these little filler things that I can throw in. So they'll have to fight like a bunch of harpies if they get to this area as filler. If they're not far enough and they get to this area, I can just remove that, and it had nothing. They don't know what you don't tell them.
Yeah, you mean the good old Strahd mentality. If you're running Strahd, the Curse of Strahd for Dungeons and Dragons, it's pretty much just throw this person in any point in time to either slow down or speed up the haste of the party.
Yeah, I use that style of mentality because it's like sometimes if I have 3 nights and the first night they haven't even made it to like a quarter way through, well, you have a problem. There's something happening. And sometimes like I'll plan out a one-nighter and it's like they're making their way there real quick, and one combat encounter can stop the entire campaign for that night, because it can take a few rounds of combat can take an hour or more, and you don't realize it. And then other times you might throw something even stronger at them. Oh, this is going to hold them up for like 2-3 hours. 15 minutes. What the hell happened? Your creature's dead on the ground. They're all, like, oh, ho, 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 we got this. And they're already moving on. So having filler and things like that to add in can definitely add another element. You can also think of it as like, if you've ever played any of like the older games, like the Fallout 1 or 2, when you're like moving around on the map, sometimes you just have a random encounter, and it's not always just raiders coming after you. Sometimes like in one of them you see the TARDIS from Doctor Who, and it just disappears as you get into the area. Or there might be merchants there and you can interact with them. Having things to throw in there to kind of slow down or move the story further and quicker are definitely good things to have. And I feel that's what I was getting from what Cody was saying earlier, sort of, to a degree, where it's like, I don't want peppers on this pizza, so I'm not going to add them. Or,
Yeah, I basically the idea that I was trying to get at, I got lost. I was thinking about pizza and my mind went there.
Yeah.
We've all been there. Been there.
The bear, my bear ancestry came forward and said, pizza now, and thoughts just stopped.
Yeah.
That's where I've been for the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. So what I was trying to get at is that I'm saying I just break down my story to the few crucial ingredients, the few basic elements that I need. Like I need my vinegar, I need my acid, I need my sweet, just so that I know where I'm heading or what I'm trying to accomplish, but I don't fill in all the details in between, because that I'm leaving open for the players, because the players do not have to participate in what I have planned out. They can go explore anything else in my world, but my plot line's still moving forward.
Yeah.
My world is still moving. The events, the conflict in my world is still going to happen, whether the players decide to open up a brewery or they decide to go out there and try to intervene and stop the war from happening, or save a village. I really just, I want to stress enough, you don't have to make an encyclopedia for your world. It would be awesome if you did. If you're capable of doing that and it's fun for you, go right ahead. But don't, like, I just feel like you don't have to put all that pressure on yourself especially as a newer person coming into this type of game style, you don't have to make Middle Earth your first go round. You know, you could just have the Shire for one night.
Or for
You
the
know,
whole campaign.
yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, one of the last things I want to just I want to put this out there before I lose the thought, is I would suggest everybody should check out. There's a gentleman on YouTube. He has his own company. It's called MCDM. His name is Matt Coville, and he talks a lot about role playing games, Dungeons and Dragons. He talks about a sandbox campaign, and he breaks it down into like the Hobbit versus the Fellowship of the Ring, and he does like more like the Hobbit was more like a sandbox. So like his analogy was that he had the players looked at the map and said, oh well, what's this mountain with the dragon there? And like that was something that was like the end all be all for the campaign setting, but the DM was able to let them go to that or be from that place, and he let the story evolve around what the player was going to bring to the world. And it's a fantastic video. You should check it out. I just did it a disservice, but you should just check it out. Really, really insightful and helpful. Even for me, somebody who I have a lot of experience making up make believe things. So I would definitely check that out.
Yeah, I mean, I know all of us could continue to talk even more on world building, because it has so many aspects of, how to go about it, and no way is the right way to kind of bring your world to justice. And it's difficult because you get to a point where you're like, oh, I really want to bring this world out, and if you get drawn into it to thinking every detail, it makes you almost hate your world. So leave it open, leave it interesting, allow for your players to affect it, and it makes for a great time.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I think a lot of people get hung up on certain things, and your players are going to get hung up on small details sometimes too. Like, oh, why does the guy in the picture have this crest on his chest? Like, they get hung up on the weirdest stuff.
Yeah.
You just got to deal with it. Sometimes that can influence your story. Other times it can derail your story. What you really need to do is just make sure that you can create something that can be engaging. It is not your responsibility to make sure everybody at the table is having fun. That's a dictatorship. Okay. You are there to create something and give an opportunity for people to engage in it or not to engage in it. You will have that player or that person at your table who's looking at their phone the whole time. They very well may be paying attention. To you, it may not seem like it. A lot of the time you just need to roll with the punches, deal with it. You'll be able to tell if people actually give a crap or don't give a crap about what you're saying. And sometimes you may need to shift gears. Other times it just may not be working out with the people you're working with. And unfortunately, it's like being in a band. If everybody's playing their instrument correctly, it's good. I think you can hear those fireworks going off for this undisclosed holiday.
Yes.
Yeah. That's going to kind of ruin things here for my part. So I'm going to have to go on mute. So, Steve, take it.
So like piggybacking off of what Frank said, like you said something about like, oh, like what is like the players get really invested in like little minutia of your world. And that made me think, well, maybe if you're running sort of like a sandbox campaign or something, or even if you have like a world planned out, that could help your world building as well, because it would tell you, well, this is what the players are focusing on. And based on that, I can build more information about those things. Why does this character have this crest on their shirt? Well, they're part of, this noble house or whatever. And it's like from them like being like, oh, well, what about the rest of the nobility? You go, you could make it an unknown thing where it's like, you haven't worked out all the nobility of the world, but you could, but you just need more time. So you could have them roll like a history check or whatever, or lore check, do whatever, and figure it out. And like they roll the thing, and you go, well, you don't really know a whole lot about it, but you think that there might be some information in this place that could tell you more about it. And then the following campaign, or the following time that you meet up to do stuff, then you have that information. And then when your players try to stump you with that minutia again, you can be like, well, here's the whole history of all the nobility of this entire region. And you could do that with pretty much anything. And so that way you're playing, you're kind of doing what the players want, even if it goes against your original idea, because if they're going to be that, if they're just going to be that kind of people that are like, well, he doesn't have this all planned out, so maybe we'll derail him with this. Then you go, now give me a week, I'll figure it out. And then you figure it out and they go, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we should focus more on what we're supposed to be doing rather than, trying to stump the DM with little factoids that he hasn't really figured out yet. And
Yeah.
at the same time, that could also help you develop your world, because you could be like, yeah, that is something about the world that I didn't think about. What like, who are these noble houses? What do they do? Why are they in the position that they're in? And that could really be a helpful tool for you as well, by like focusing on like
Absolutely. And that is something that is a added benefit to leaving blank space in your world. Not only because you can mold it into what is of interest to your players or what you need it to be for what your players have done, to correspond to their actions or the things that they've done, but it's also, it allows you to kind of make things up on the fly. And I love doing that too. I love it when a player asks me a really good question and I say, oh, I don't know. I have to think about it, and I have to sit there and I have to make a decision. And sometimes it's, you can make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Sometimes you can say things and then realize, well, that was that's not what I meant, or it you find out that it counteracts something that you told somebody else. Everybody makes mistakes. So yeah, leaving those little blank spots, it allows for the collaboration between you and your players, allows you to really make it more of a fleshed out thing.
Yeah, world building, it's tough. There's no right or wrong. I can't stress that enough. You kind of just got to roll with the punches, and you try one thing. If your party doesn't like it, well, that's not for this party, but it doesn't mean it can't be used on another group you play with. As always.
Yeah, exactly. Like just because you've come up with an idea for a world and you're really excited to play it out, and then you get a bunch of players that are not into that idea and want to do something different, that doesn't mean that you can't go back and reuse that world a second time with a different group of people, or even some of the same people but some different ones, so that way you can,
somebody's doing right now.
Yeah,
exactly.
Discount DM recycled that campaign.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's we could go on for so much longer. I would say if anybody has a lot of questions on tips or tricks and they wanna hear more from us, definitely let us know. But I think that should wrap us up for this episode on world building with Tabletop Totality. Any last comments, guys?
Yeah, probably the only other thing that I would try to say is that you have to, I mean, nobody knows you better than yourself. I don't know your players, so I can't tell you the end all be all, the best advice, but I would recommend that you be open to the feel of the game that you're making. What is it? What the world that you're making? What do you want it to feel like? Yeah. Like in the world that I have made now, Toleraxia, my homebrew, I wanted to make a unending conflict where people are on edge and everybody is kind of desperate to see this war end, to the point where people are doing horrific things to try to stop the war, to try to get the war to just end, to get the
Yeah.
other side to give up. Similar to like trench warfare, but in a Dungeons and Dragons setting where people are just willing to do inhumane things to try to see it an end point. And I feel like I've done a good job at conveying that feeling in my setting to my players without having them actually be on the battlefield. Like they are able to talk to people and interact with, my world enough to see and feel that, yeah, this has been a oppressive place. This has been a dangerous place. And I feel like sometimes that's something that you can focus on, and not so much the details, but the feel, the essence of your world. Like
Yeah.
like an HP Lovecraft story, like it's set in like his New England. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
that's the setting. And
Yep.
it's the same thing like with Stephen King. Like even though like Stephen King has whole works that take place in different dimensions and everything, but he also has towns that show up in other books and are mentioned. He's got his own world, little history that he connects everything together. So yeah, I think those places, they have a feel to them. A Stephen King setting has its own feel.
Yeah, yeah. No,
So
you definitely you got to create that feel and kind of that idea of what you want your setting to be. And that pretty much will dictate, I think, how your players also treat it. If they get that feel, then they're gonna treat it even subconsciously that way. Um, so that's a pretty
Yeah.
good point. I like
Yeah, 'cause
that.
I think that I think even you guys are both players in my setting, and Frank had played in the setting previously. Um, I think it's fair to say that no one's character can say that they weren't somehow affected by the war,
Oh yeah,
or they weren't in some way they've been affected by what's going on.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And I feel like that's the overall feeling of the setting.
Yep.
So that would be my ending point, is just to imagine what you want your world to be, and make sure it feels that way without spending so much time looking at all the small print.
yeah.
That's all.
That's a good one. What about you, Steve? Any last thought?
Yeah, kind of just reiterating what I said in the beginning of sort of like you can create a world that what this place is, and exactly like what you've created, but you should at the same time have some way for your player characters to sort of come into that world if they don't originally come from there. Like you don't need to be like, well, like you come from this place and this is the place that you are from. You could have them come from outside, and that would open up a way for them to both have the freedom to create the character that they want to create instead of being stuck to a stringent guideline based on the world that you're setting the game in, but also allows for you to expand the world outwards using the players' creations in order to further expand and develop the world that you have sort of started with this one area. And that sort of helps the what's the word I'm looking for, the
Overlord.
Yeah, the Overlord. No, the way that you and the players are both sort of working together to make this story happen, because they're not only players in the story, but they're also helping to create the world that the story takes place in. Collaborative storytelling, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, it's you can just do basically whatever you want, and the players can do whatever they want. But yeah, again, do not get bogged down in all the minutia. And just sort of try to figure out how to roll with the punches and not sort of get discouraged when you shouldn't be trying to like railroad your characters into a story. Like they should be able to do whatever they want, and like if they come up with a question that you can't answer, like just either give them an impossible check to figure out that thing, and tell them that you'll come back to them at the week, or just tell them you don't know and you'll have the answer for them next time, and have give yourself time to work on it. Don't be afraid to tell your players that, you know, if there's an aspect of the world you don't know, like just be like, yeah, I didn't figure that out yet. You know, don't be afraid of your players, but your players also shouldn't be like, you know, that sort of like trying to figure out that sort of.
We're proponents for dungeon master rights here.
Exactly. But yeah, like when you're creating a world, just sort of make whatever you want it to be, more or less. And if the players want to play in that space, then, you know, they can go right ahead. If they want to goof around and not really do it, then, you know, maybe it's not the setting for them. But, you know, you should still try to make it work. You know, see if you can get them on track.
And you can also you can also, like, just to add into what you were saying, like, you know, you can also reskin something.
Yeah, for sure.
Make it work. You know, to make it work. Like, so if you had an encounter with, say, you know, they were supposed to go investigate a missing person that led them into a cave full of kobolds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then they decide, well, they don't want to investigate a missing person. They just want to buy a brewery.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fine. Well, the people that bring your wheat and your grain and your barley for you to brew, like, they're missing. Man.
They're missing. Yeah.
Their wagons got stolen. So
yeah.
Now they have to go and they have to deal with the kobolds, but it's for something that matters to them.
Exactly.
You know, so every time you hit a hiccup, you don't have to scrap what you have. You just you have to quickly refit it to work with what's going on.
Right.
And I think that's a bigger point of what we've been saying about just, you don't have to have every little thing figured out. You just have to have enough so that you can deal with what comes and, you know, still have a good time.
Yeah. You gotta hit that reuse, reduce, recycle, you know.
Exactly. But yeah, just when you're making a world, but when you're making a world, just have fun with it. That's kind of basically all I'm trying to say. It's just like, make what you want and
just have
fun with it.
You know, sit yourself down, throw some Bob Ross on there, and make some pretty good trees.
Exactly.
I think that's gonna wrap it up for us here. From Tabletop Totality.
These bone ponies are dry.
Yeah, we gotta bring them back in and brush them down. I'm not sure how you take care of a bone pony, but
gotta scrub them and brush them.
No, the way you take care of a bone pony is you just let them do what they're gonna do and let them get it out of their system.
You don't have to take care of a bone pony because they a grown ass bone pony.
Yeah, they can take care of themselves. All right, folks. Everybody, enjoy their world building out there.
Yeah,
and we'll see you next time.
Worlds.
Oh yeah, make them good. Bye.
All right, bone ponies. This is Kerrigan Runekeeper from Tabletop Totality. If you like what you've been hearing, be sure to check us out on Twitter and the Instagrams. Also, take a peek at our YouTube channel. You can also visit our website at tabletoptotality.com, where we showcase our created content, including creatures, items, articles, and other fine information. You can also visit our Patreon, where there's exclusive content for as little as $1 copper piece a month. Once again, you can find all of these links and more at tabletoptotality.com.